Hi, and welcome to Deep Dialogues, 12 extraordinary conversations I'm having with amazing female soul stewards who at this time are transmitting their unconditional love, empathy, and compassion about the creation of a new level of living, and therefore helping us to form ideas about a brave new world that we can create together. Have a wonderful time listening in. This is amazing. And all sorts of wonderful people are joining. Unfortunately, Chloe, you can't see who's joining, but I'll introduce them to you later. So this is wonderful. So we'll begin. And, everybody, I'm going to welcome our glorious guest in a moment. But firstly, I just want to say to all those people who are tuning in, thank you for being here for this first deep dialogue. It'll be a series probably of about 12, whereby I interview, or have a dialogue with, I should say, remarkable female soul stewards around the world. And this evening we have, oh gosh, I'm so thrilled, we have the wonderful Chloe Goodchild. So everybody, you are in for a treat. Now, let me just give you a little bit of information about who Chloe is, because she's a very, very remarkable lady around the world. Indeed, for a number of years, this is a very mature witness that we have with us. Chloe has been a singer, philosopher, spirit teacher, author, and of course, principally the founder of The Naked Voice. Now, Chloe is the founder of The Naked Voice, a pioneering experiential vocal training program providing sound awareness toolkits and conscious core practices, music, audiobooks, and spoken meditations that empower you to find and embody your authentic voice. The Naked Voice Charitable Foundation was established in 2004 to disseminate a deeper awareness of the essential role conscious communication plays in strengthening ethical awareness, social health, well-being, and in every other form of or realm of human existence. And Chloe's seminal book, The Naked Voice, subtitled Transform Your Life with the Power of Sound, was published by North Atlantic Books in 2015. And thank heavens, because I was constantly saying, where is that book? And now we have it. A beautiful text. So Chloe, my darling, welcome to this wonderful dialogue. And thank you from the bottom of my soul for being here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be in this dialogue with you, Stewart. Great pleasure.
I know that we've, throughout this very unusual 3-month period, this global pause, that you and I have periodically had touch base times where we've talked for quite a considerable amount of time about our varying perceptions of what's going on in the world. And I know that when we touched base this morning to discuss the rough topography that we could consider this evening, one of the things that we touched into was your fascinating interest in how the harmonies of sound can bring us into greater harmony, greater alignment, greater sense of center, so that our soul's trajectories become more precisely aligned, etc., etc. And I wonder if you could possibly open this evening by just giving us a brief intro on what you feel about the divine harmonies.
Well, basically, the divine harmonies exist in every single human heart. I was fascinated. You were just saying this morning and mentioning about this extraordinary little circle of crystals that are at the center of the human heart. And we were just starting to really explore the impact of the potency of what's going on there, right at the heart of a human being. And it would seem as if many human beings over the course of the last few hundred years have been led to believe that the heart is to be ruled by the rational mind. And so the experience of that innate harmony that is in all of us Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. In fact, no shadow present at that point. We have been in this illusion that the heart has to be in service to the rational mind. And basically, what's happening right now, and what I've been experiencing, and I think we've all been experiencing, witnessing the present protests, for example, is that enough is enough. Enough is enough. And this kind of illusion of, the love of power at the expense of power of love is over. Is over. It's over. And it'll take a little while for us as a humanity to actually really understand what that means for us, because it is going to require us as human beings to absolutely embody what exists right at the heart, in that harmonious center of the heart, and so that we can remember ourselves, remember the resonance that is in there, as opposed to the illusion of dissonance that is assailing us from all sides, from just unconscious power and institutional violence and so on. And so now is a very, very extraordinary time. And it is going to require us to be unbelievably intentional, embodied, and present, and awake to, the human collective song. It's like we have to now realize we have got to take responsibility for our shared song. And that song has been hidden for a very long time. But that song is essentially the song of unconditional, loving presence. And here we are. Here we are.
What a beautiful statement. Where do you feel it was hid?
I think it wasn't actually hidden, but I think we kind of, the rational mind came in and tried to convince us it was hidden, because the reality is there is nothing else going on, really, is there? The reality is that unconditional loving presence is all there is. Um, but I guess this kind of diminishing of our awareness, and the ways in which we've been taught over centuries to talk rather than sing, to speak rather than sing, to communicate solely from one small part of the brain, the left side of the brain, as opposed to the whole brain. And once we understand what, true singing is, which is not entertainment or performance, or, it is a transforming act in which the whole individual is present. And that's what's so exciting about this time, because now is the time for us to remember ourselves that way, as whole, resonant human beings.
And as a result of that resonance, we're kicking into, so to speak, we're kickstarting the entire definition of what it is to feel authenticity.
Lovely. Yes, yes. And feeling, which has been so underrated, hasn't it, for so long?
Yes, I mean, to the point where many of us have forgotten our feeling literacy. So it's not that we don't feel things, it's just that we don't know what we're feeling. We don't know what to call them. So we can just be very generalized about, well, actually, I just feel like shit. Or
Yes.
is rather than, well, no, actually, what I'm feeling is genuine grief. What I'm feeling is untold sorrow. What I'm feeling, etc., etc., etc. And it's something occurred to me as you were describing this the wonderful thesis, but more importantly, experiential, that you've created over the years. That one of the things that I was so fascinated by in the early 90s, when I became involved through Sam Wanamaker at Shakespeare's Globe, that as we built this Renaissance chamber, sound was seen. And it was always up, the four tiers in the theatre, the earth, water, the 2 hours traffic of the stage was water level. And then, of course, the air level, where the musicians' gallery was also exactly where the lords would have sat, the lords' rooms. And so, in other words, the audience could see sound.
Oh my goodness.
Whereas then, during the Restoration, and the early part of the 18th century, the sound was locked in the orchestra pit. In other words, sound was taken into the underworld.
Yes.
And I believe, if I'm right, and of course, you know, you're a superb musician, and my musicianship is questionable rather. That at the same time, the harmonic within the orchestra was also shifted
Oh, yes.
at that time. So
Yes.
it's interesting, isn't it, that there was this pervasive
Hmm.
need within the age of enlightenment
Hmm.
to reduce sound. And that's really, I suppose, what the spur was in my consciousness when I asked, well, where was it hid? And it was really hidden in our heads, wasn't it? And
Right.
the maze of the head, because we were just fixating on left brain procedures.
Yeah. Well, I guess we've been in a hypnosis. We've been in a kind of we've all colluded with this kind of hypnosis. Uh, you know that that the journey through the reactive emotions of the egoic mind, deeper down into the deeper positive feelings of the psyche, was just not worth considering. It wasn't. It wasn't regarded as an art form. It wasn't regarded as a sacred act. It wasn't regarded. It wasn't even remembered as fundamental to human consciousness itself. There's a wonderful. May I just read you? I've got this lovely quote from About Sound Itself, from the wonderful, I wonder if you know this book by Anne Baring, The Dream of the Cosmos.
Mm, mm,
Wonderful. She herself is an extraordinary cosmologist and a great Jungian analyst and so on. But she actually is quoting somebody else in this book, somebody who wrote a book called The Face of Glory, and I thought you might enjoy that. Creativity, Consciousness, and Civilization. And it just starts with this glorious quote: creation begins and continues as a single sound. That sound includes all ideas, meanings, and all expressions of meaning, and all possible languages. It is universal consciousness letting itself be known as the word. That sound holds within itself all rhythms, melodies, chords, and all the possibilities of music. It is universal consciousness letting itself be known as song. Now, this is, it goes on, in the most glorious, it says things like, that sound resonates in eternity, and its resonances create voids and spaces and a diversity of experiences of time. The time experience of a galaxy, a tree, a man, a mayfly. It still holds within itself all lights and all darknesses and all possible varieties of colours. It also holds all natural laws and the principles of life and the intelligent life. It creates beings capable of consciousness themselves. This is the key thing. It creates beings capable of consciousness themselves who are the spectators and the audiences of its creation. It is universal consciousness letting itself be known as glory. That's, I just love that. So, as the human race, we've forgotten this, haven't we?
yes, I actually would love to say we've unremembered it.
Right. Thank you.
Because what's
Yes.
interesting, apropos our conversation, that when we begin to utter these words, it is almost as though the universal sound is echoing through us, and it's been echoing all the time. And suddenly we wake up, oh yes, and we know that we knew it.
Lovely. Yes, yes, yes.
If I may, I just wanted to add to this,
Mm,
because there you are with your immense appreciation of the harmonies,
mm.
the divine harmonies, and of course, as you've just given this wonderful impetus of the universal sound becoming at one with consciousness of Homo sapien. The man that hath no music in himself, nor is not moved with the concord of sweet sounds, is fit for treasons, stratagems, and spoils. The motions of his spirit are as dull as night, and his affections dark as Erebus. Let no such man be trusted.
I love that.
And that's a, you know, a 15-year-old boy in Renaissance boy in The Merchant of Venice by William Shakespeare. It's Lorenzo.
God.
So, in other words, for them, they were able to appreciate the totality of what we're sharing. And now what's happening, and isn't it interesting for these last 3 months that we've had this silence?
I've loved that. Have you? It's like,
Just been extraordinary.
yeah.
Because I know we shared during our conversation through the last 3 months of the fact that we felt the Divine Mother was asking us to
Mm,
touch into a deep, deep listening,
mm,
which stimulated or inspired me, startled me so greatly, quickened me. But
mm,
I thought, now I want to have deep dialogues.
wonderful.
And that deep listening has taken us into the field of silence more and more
Mm,
and more and more and more and more and more.
mm.
It reminds me also of a statement of the Lord Mayor of London in 1597 when he said that all speech was decorated silence.
Wow, I love that. I love that. I mean, because without, so we've forgotten, we have been led to believe that silence is just not saying anything or the space between one, phrase and the next, rather than itself being a dynamic language. Uh, you know, uh, and so I often say now to people that I'm working with, particularly, which is most people, this they present themselves with this kind of terror of sound. So they will start perhaps by saying, and it is very, we all know this so well, this a kind of apprehension about speaking our own truth, because of there's a whole conversation around that, why that is. But when I say to somebody, what, okay, so how do you feel? And then how does that sound? So then they will say, well, I couldn't possibly, what do you mean? How does that sound? That not realizing that feeling itself is an expression of the music of the soul and that it is just immediately accessible to anyone. But finally, when they realize actually it is possible just to even utter something, to actually ease the situation by saying, what quality of silence does your voice leave behind? And that kind of question started creeping in just a few years ago. And I realized that just by simply asking that question, it completely disappears self-consciousness, because suddenly we're not concerned about what's coming out of the mouth in the same way. We're more ready to address what happens when the sound comes to an end.
Right.
And then that instills within the individual the beginnings of the capacity to witness oneself without judging. And that is a really pretty essential gift from silence, isn't it, really? That it gives us that time, that moment, that breathing space to go, not to rush in and go, oh, that was terrible, wasn't it? Or, or that was really good, or whatever. The egoic mind will sneak in, and come in with. But to actually just let the egoic mind just say, it's okay, you've got a new job. Just got a new job. We don't want to get rid of you. We don't want to annihilate you. We just want you to understand you've got a new job, which is to be curious, to be attentive without judging, what is being heard. And then it's just remarkable what can happen, isn't it? Because we can just in that utterly simple moment start to hear ourselves as we may never have heard ourselves.
Mm. And this is really the core of your work, isn't it? I mean, this is the authenticity of the naked voice. Is that correct?
Well, I'm absolutely passionate about that moment, yes, and just realizing, that what's going on in the brain at that point is that, that the left brain is relaxing, the whole brain is actually being switched on ultimately. The pineal gland is starting to vibrate because it's suddenly being called into action again. Uh, and, there's that, the beginnings of an appreciation of oneself, without the dominance of the personality voice. Suddenly we're sinking down into a deeper knowing of oneself and a deeper potential for expression.
So I don't want this to sound outlandish, this statement, and it's a question. Do you feel, therefore, that once the harmonies have been symphonized in that way, and there is this extraordinary moment of silence and stillness
Mm,
after sounding,
mm,
that in that moment, all shame, all regret, all denial, all
mm,
of the, all I'm thinking of
mm,
the fear, the
mm,
fear of being vulnerable, all
mm,
of these
mm.
compacted emotions suddenly fall away.
Yeah, they do. And I mean, sometimes for some, it's absolutely yes to that.
Yeah.
And now, how is that possible? I mean,
Well, it's pure magic, isn't it? And I'm sort of, as I listen to you, I'm thinking, wow, I'm really with this. But we're sound people, meaning we've been working with the voice, with you musically and myself with the speaking voice for many, many, many years. So we understand the resonances and the deep thoughts and listenings that go with it. And I'm just thinking about the way that our wonderful people who are listening in are also appreciating it. And there's a story I'd love to share, which I think you'd also find amusing. And this is really going to young ones. This was going to children. And the situation was that I was in Toronto working 3 years ago. It's a city I know very well, and mostly for my work with actors. There's a very thriving acting community there. And one of my actors, who I adore, said, Isabel and Jean, her two daughters, would really love you to come to their music concert this afternoon. Would you come? And I thought, oh gosh, do I really want to go and sit for 3 hours listening? So I said that both girls came and draped themselves around my neck, saying, "You are coming, Stuart. You are coming." So I said, "Okay, darlings, I'm coming. I'm coming. I'm coming." And it was one of the most beautiful experiences because I think there were probably about 20 children,
wow.
ranging from 5 through to 15, and they were all instrumentalists. They all had piano, guitar, violin, cello. The point of the story, that's just giving context, but the point of the story was that particularly for the young ones, when they began, if they fucked up, he just went straight back to the beginning and started again with no visage of shame at all. They just simply went back and started. And I thought, this is extraordinary because there was no self immolation. Nobody was beating themselves up. They were just going all the way back.
Oh,
And as though they were literally, although they were aware of the audience, as though they were literally in this extraordinary kinesphere of their own creation at one with the divine.
oh,
So
beautiful.
the innocence just shone through. And I was very tired because I'd been working extraordinarily hard in Santa Fe, I seem to remember. And there was a moment where my eyes sort of, but I was so enraptured by this extraordinary naked truth of
Right.
the voices that were coming forth were actually their instrumental voices rather than their own voices. But it seemed almost as though their own voices were opened in the
Mm,
sense of the lack of shame or the lack of regret or the lack of
mm,
being punished. I say well done to their music teachers
Right.
because evidently they've opened a space, an arena of such freedom that the little ones don't feel judged.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Yeah, and then you realise that it's almost as if there's a second music being made. You know, it's almost like the hidden curriculum of what's actually being presented on the surface. Something deeper is understood, and there's a confidence, there's a trust, there's a faith, there's an interconnectedness there, which is not concerned, yes, about the usual kind of self-conscious, am I going to impress you, entertainment, performance orientation. And that's, I mean, what a relief, you know.
Mm.
Uh,
Because I completely completely at one with you, because I know in terms of the work that I've done over the years, helping the actor or the artist or the great speaker or somebody that just is having challenges with speaking, speaking at work or in front of the family or whatever. But when I tune them into their note,
mm,
there is this startling moment of absolute stillness in them. And then they either burst into floods of tears or laugh hilariously or are deeply shocked by the plentitude, the magnificence, and the glory, to use the word that was echoed in Anne Baring's statement.
Glorious. Yeah, I mean, it is. It's like the lid of the egoic mind is just taken off, isn't it? You know, then suddenly you're in this, you're beyond the conceptual mind.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, the conceptual mind has no longer got you in this kind of tight shoe of
yeah.
how life actually is. You know, you're suddenly in this wide. It's like falling in love, isn't it? It's that's
Absolutely.
yeah.
Now, another little story to illustrate. At the Globe, what I would do if a great person came to work at the Globe is that I would always have an hour with them initially on stage
Hmm,
by themselves and nobody in the house. So it was just an empty theatre.
lovely.
And I would try to tentatively nudge them towards, why don't we sound? You stand on the lip of the stage, I'll go down into the ground, in the groundlings, and just, why did you just say something? So I'm thinking of Vanessa. This is Vanessa Redgrave,
Oh
who
my goodness. Right.
and we knew one another, so she was very easy with me. But
Wonderful.
what was interesting is while I was working with Vanessa, Mark Rylance, the artistic director, walked in with Al Pacino. So there was Al Pacino, so we had an audience. And so I said, darling, okay, why don't you just sit in your note? Because by that time we discovered what her note was. Why don't you just sit in the note? Because where you're standing on the lip of the stage, you're right in the very center of the sacred geometry of the circle of the globe, because it's the, representing the divine feminine.
Yes.
Without using her voice in any degree of volume, she just said, to be or not to be, that is the question. And
Mm,
the whole building shook,
mm, mm.
not with the volume, but with the absolute resonance. And she burst into floods of tears. And
Oh.
Al Pacino said to me, what the fuck did you just do? I want to do that. This extraordinary moment where we were all just so startled,
Right.
the beauty of the nakedness of this extraordinary artist who we've seen reveal
Mm,
extraordinary truths over the years,
mm.
greatly or not so greatly, whatever the situation was. And
Yeah.
here she was completely revealed.
Unbelievable, isn't it? And that the grace of that, the grace of that, isn't it? I mean, I think what you're pointing to, and what I love so much about your voice, and why I love these conversations that we have with each other, is because your voice straddles from the silence into the spoken, into the poetic, and into the sung. So you have a resonance in your sound that covers the field, and so it's such a joy just to talk. Doesn't it? We could be just reciting, railway timetables or something. It wouldn't actually, at one level, it actually wouldn't matter because the sound, what we're connecting with is, when you think about, people that you love hanging out with or you love listening to, it's a lot to do with the resonance of the voice every bit as much as what is being said. If you think of stand-up comedians, for example, or comedians that don't have to crack funny jokes, they just literally, they can just move their arm in one direction and it's absolutely hilarious. And so it's that kind of unspoken voice, or it's that kind of, it's a magical presence that exists, or that is released or liberated from someone who is not busy trying to be somebody. They're not busy trying to, that sort of exhausting process of, trying to demonstrate just how incredibly important they are, and how terribly monotonous that is. And of course, most of the world is being, as we are seeing, or has been to this point, been driven by that kind of very low level of consciousness. And I suppose, if you look at the different ways in which we listen to ourselves, there's the biological, the physical, there's the psychological, and then there's this deeper subterranean sort of the depths of the human soul that is really ignited when the harmony of the heart really is allowed to be itself. It's just to be itself. And that can be really ordinary. That can be, you just be having an ordinary conversation. It doesn't have to be, Caccini's Ave Maria, although that's very glorious as well.
Because apropos what we're discussing and where we are at the moment, and how we were sharing earlier on in our pre-show chat about the way that people are using their voices today in non-violent, peaceful protest.
Yes.
So in other words, we speak largely inspirationally,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they are evidently arising out of a place of desperation, not inspiration.
Right,
As a
yes.
result, their acts have become inspirational, but they're actually being triggered by desperation.
Right,
And there those voices are rising, even if it is a rapt chant, in
right.
defiance of the brutality that people have received from
Mm.
the police force,
Right.
or the federal protectors in every single city in the United States. This is the most astonishing thing. And of course, all the details we know of, because there have been many people who have fallen almost as though they were battle heroes or heroines, who have fallen under the cudgel or under the tear gas or under the bullet. But what's wonderful about those voices is that they've all been lifted up in glory,
Mm.
almost as though they're hearing the echo of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and
Mm.
of Bobby Kennedy. This is what I've found so moving when I've listened. And sometimes the sound, of course, is raucous. It
Mm.
doesn't feel as though it's fully in harmony. But
Mm.
then when we scream, when we yell in defiance, when we
Mm.
say, go away, that often is not
Mm.
full harmony, because
Mm.
the nature of the statement that we're making, it comes from a much more raw, visceral place.
Mm.
So there's something happening, isn't there, this at this time,
It's
that
been, it's been extraordinary, hasn't it, to see on the media just these very moving images of policemen, just holding hands with the protesters
yeah.
or bowing down to them. It's like, how is that suddenly happening? That kind of completely heartfelt response to the apparent enemy. In the past, what would have been the enemy, suddenly something new is occurring, isn't it? It's as if the kind of the enslavement laws, of humanity are being lifted in some way. I mean, without wanting to romanticize it, because let's be clear, it's very complex what's going on. But there's definitely something new happening here, because it's as if we are being compelled as human beings to dive deeper into ourselves now And that despair is kind of strangely unpacking a new way of being, as you're describing, which is extraordinary, isn't it? You
And
know,
I mean, I hear you absolutely, and I completely concur. A new way of being, a new level of living,
a new level.
and that new level, because we can feel that there's a vibrational shift.
Right.
That there's no way we're going back, which is why when people say, well, when are we going back to normal? No, we're never going back to normal.
No.
Normal was all about existing. This is about being vitally alive.
Right.
So that we're able to speak our hearts and speak our souls and speak our minds.
Yeah.
You know, and the balance of sounded sound and silent sound.
Mm.
I mean, I'm reminded, I did tell this story last Monday when I was in another conversation on air, but I feel I must tell you because I don't think we've shared this.
Okay.
It came to me about 5 years ago when I was asked, my PA said, the British Army wants you to work with one of their generals. And I thought, what? The British Army? Why do I have to get work with the British Army? What is going to happen here? I mean, I was in such judgment. It was I'm ashamed of that level of judgment because automatically I tuned back into the vibration of my pa, who was a decorated soldier in war and so forth. Anyway, so I said, well, do what you need to do, my PA, organize it. So I walked into the Royal Guards Club on Piccadilly. It's called something of the Royal Guards and Cavalry Officers or something, which I hadn't been in for 50 years. And a voice said, hello, Master Pearce. And this man who was a boy, he was one of the delivery boys, has now become the concierge in the club. And he remembered me from 50 years ago. Isn't that extraordinary? So I
Oh.
knew that the resonance of this situation was just extraordinary. It was almost as though time had stood still, but
Mm.
we're both very different men now.
Whoa.
Slightly older than I,
Yeah.
anyway, but still the same. And then I met the Lieutenant General Sir Arthur De Niro, and we fell into this impassioned conversation about his voice. He was an immensely powerful member of the British Army,
Mm.
and in retirement, because he was late septuagenarian, he'd become the provost at Sandhurst, so the
Mm.
headmaster, so to speak. So there was all of this cachet, and he'd served in the Falklands, and he'd served in Northern Ireland, and he was asked to lead the men in Iraq,
Whoa.
that unbelievable skirmish. And of course, when he told me this, I said, "Oh, and what did you experience? Waiting for." And he was a wonderful raconteur, so he went into this story, and he told me a little bit about um, what the combat details were about. But the chief part of the story, apropos what we're sharing, is that he needed to march the British forces, the regiments, out of Baghdad at the end of the conflict,
Mm.
if there ever was an end. But as far as the armed forces were concerned.
Mm.
And when they were marching through the streets of Baghdad, the Baghdadians came in unbelievable wrath. I mean, their anger was just, and they had pitchforks, carving knives, knitting needles,
Mm.
whatever, guns, whatever they could. And the brouhaha as the men silently, because their order was no retaliation, just silently walk with their guns. And gradually, the energy was becoming so that he knew that the men were going to be attacked by thousands of members of the city of Baghdad. And so I said, what did you do? And he said, well, through the sergeant majors, I ordered the men to stop marching. And they bowed their heads
Mm.
and they dropped to their knees and they put their rifles down. And
Mm.
there was this extraordinary silence,
Mm. Mm.
startled by silence.
Oh, wow.
Rifles came in. And evidently the skirmish, the brouhaha, had
Mm.
been quelled. So after 10 or 15 minutes of this,
Mm.
he
Mm.
ordered the men to get up. They picked their rifles up and they marched off. I mean,
Wow.
the ingenuity, I mean, this is a very special man, obviously, the
Yes.
ingenuity of that, because that's very unusual behavior, isn't it? When we see, for example, although, as you were saying, we see some policemen who are being extraordinary, and now that they're learning that their brothers or their sisters in protection have been outrageous in their behaviors, in
Mm,
attitude towards the peaceful protesters, that
mm,
they are turning into these
mm.
vessels of grace and kneeling.
So we, as ordinary human beings, have now got to really understand what we have got to generate and manifest and embody through intention, through conscious, non-violent self-awareness, sound awareness within ourselves, because we are in a period of extraordinary complexity and darkness at one level. And so what you're really inspiring me to reflect on, and something that I'm really exploring for myself so deeply and with others, is what qualities have we got to really generate within ourselves now in order to be able to really embody that quality of presence that is fearless, that is absolutely free of fear, because it's only fear that creates the enemy, that creates an enemy. And why is that? Because fear is based on the illusion of separateness, that I am separate from you, and therefore you stand back, I'm somebody. And so this again, of course, is where sound is such a profound tool for just instilling within people. It's like food. I'm thinking also, as you're reminding me of that amazing story of Estonia, the singing revolution, where over a period of, I think it was 100 years in Estonia, which has one of the biggest folk libraries in Europe, apparently. So they are steeped in music as a culture. They're used to, singing is still happening in everyday living. It hasn't been separated. And every year, despite the fact that, whether it was the Stalinists or the Nazis or whatever it was, that whatever occupying force was decimating them year after year and razing them to the ground over a period of 100 years, that they were allowed to come together in their thousands every year to sing at their festival. They had a yearly festival. And there's actually a film now that you can see of this, the most extraordinary documentary. So, for example, as I understand it, Stalin says, okay, we will give you permission to do this, as long as your lyrics that you use are absolutely emulating our politics. And so even though they agreed to do that, because their melodies were more profound, the melodies were really just holding them in this deep embodiment of presence, of fearlessness, of coherence together, interconnectedness and fearlessness. And over the period of about 100 years, the long story short, what actually ends up happening is that when perestroika happens and Gorbachev comes in and says, okay, freedom of speech, everybody can, that gave them the leverage they needed to say, hey, this is not okay. And they literally used their singing, their constant interconnected singing, was the very nonviolent weapon that they used, which ultimately sang the Russians out of their country. And you see this in the movie, and it's so beautiful. It's the most, exquisite reminder to us as human beings. We can all do this. This is our true nature, to be this. There is no enemy in.
The thought comes to my mind that as we look at the regimes in our contemporary existence,
Right.
and we're beginning to see that through the organ of transparency and through the glaring stupidity of some of the actions that are being perpetrated, obviously the actions that have been chosen are arising from a very different state of their own rationale from what we're seeing, because we're seeing the truth, whereas they seem to be performing behind the mask
Right.
of power.
Right.
That if we want to bring about vast change, which I feel all sentient beings on the planet at the moment do, because we're seeing that this is no longer serving us,
Mm.
would you profess that we need, would you suggest that we need to sound an outer power?
Without question, without question. And I mean, what is interesting is that that is what is happening.
Hmm.
In fact, isn't it? I mean, if you just think of the very simple examples, again, the media are letting through of, just ordinary people coming out on their balconies, in tenement buildings and singing, let the sun shine in on me, all together, because they're local heroes. That was the pop song of their people, and in Italy, obviously, it's just innate. I mean, I remember once also another wonderful example of this where I was very privileged to experience when working with a group of international policymakers. You had there people who were trying to make decisions about Star Wars, at that time, and which is still continuing. But what was so extraordinary was how these incredible, mainly men, noble men of war, I would say, given the opportunity to sing to each other, completely disappeared.
Wow.
The language, the quality of communication, from launching the killing vehicle to Ave Maria, and what was interesting was that it was the divine feminine that came out of the Italian, my Italian friend there. And, I remember we were in a circle and I just said to him, would you lead us, the most musical, culture of Europe? And there were 35 different countries there from all around the world representing different, attempts at how do we protect our people, how do we defend ourselves from the enemy and all of that. And he just went, no, 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 no. I mean, it was just too embarrassing for him to do it. But the rest of the world was going, oh, yes. Yes, because we're not ready to do it. You're gonna do it. So he literally went, no, no, no. But because he was Italian, he couldn't help himself. His body was already rising up, and this amazing sort of revelation of the feminine just came out of him. Like he could have been in the Sistine Chapel. He could have been, and it was just like, oh, Ave Maria. And he was singing over to Canada, and Canada was like, oh my God. And then Canada was like singing over to Norway, and it was so moving. It was so disarming, that something so simple as just singing a gift of your sound to another person, just however it comes out, to another country that, in the political world is usually your opponent. Suddenly it was like everybody, we were just one field. And that whole notion of a singing field came from that experience. Because
Yes, mention that to everybody, will you?
yeah.
Your recording of the singing field.
Well, the singing field, for me, yes, as I say, really came out of sort of years of really investigating with people. Who is there an enemy? Okay, so the egoic mind is ultimately the enemy. And so once we can make peace with the egoic mind, and we then can realize that the egoic mind, once it's supporting the soul to sing its song, then anything is possible. And I would say probably when I heard 20,000 people in Madison Square Gardens singing the Divine Mother's name, it was the most unbelievable experience of my life. I mean, it was It was the vagina monologues. It was, so I'd been asked to write the music, make music for the musical version of the vagina monologues in Madison Square Gardens. So we had 20,000 people, and my choir was called the Vulva Choir, and 75 of the top actresses of the world. And I remember, God bless her, holding Jane Fonda, because it had been very important. Eve Ensler had said to me, make sure that whatever music you make, whatever language you use for it, does not, is not in any way affiliated to any religion or any political system or anything. It doesn't have any sort of connotations. And so I just used the word ma, which obviously is the root word of mother, and mater and matrix and the mother of the world, And there we were singing. We were actually singing and invoking the Divine Mother's presence as Gaia.
Right.
And so that then turned into out beyond ideas of right and wrong doing, there is a field, a singing field. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. Which is that tune actually, Lydian mode, takes away all fear once you have that sharpened fourth in there, the augmented fourth.
Could you just expound on that for everybody? Was there
Yeah.
not possibly listening in?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because so what that is there is a field, a fitting field, la 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 la. You also hear it in Maria. When somebody's falling in love, I call it the Dalai Lama's scale. It was a musical scale that was abolished in the 17th century by the Christian church for being known as the devil in music, which is absolutely incredible, isn't it, when you think? And it's almost as if we were that sound, that potential for compassion was taken away by just simply depriving us of that interval. It's extraordinary to think of that, which again demonstrates the potency of sound, and particularly when two or three are gathered together, what happens, and whether it's 20,000 or whether it's three, actually doesn't make the blindest bit of difference, It's profound. It's profound. So we, these modes, these musical modes, that's another whole conversation, of course, is how our emotional moods themselves can be elevated, can be consciously navigated through an understanding of their partnering musical modes. It's interesting that the word mode and mood is so close.
That's beautiful. Thank you. It's profound. It's absolutely profound, and I'm sure it's touching everybody. I'm seeing lots of beautiful statements on the chat box. So to speak. So beautiful. Hello Sabine says, my soul is melting. My soul melts. And Marie is saying, how beautiful. So there are many, many beautiful things being said. And incidentally, I mean, Chloe and I are very aware of you, the wonderful people that are tuning in. But, we at the same time, we're holding this wonderful harmonic between us, or series of harmonics. If anybody has a question, please just type it into. This is on. This is at Stewart Pearce Master of Voice page, isn't it? That's right. So if if you want to type in a question, please do, everybody. Otherwise, Chloe and I are going to keep going.
Well, let's be clear. This is the field, isn't it? You've
This,
created here
this is
between, because this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for the everybody present. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And am I right in saying that we know that your ingenuity in developing the word of describing the field in song you were inspired by Rumi,
Very much. That comes from Rumi. Yeah.
and then you went on and made that extraordinary recording of
Right.
the field, which is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever heard. And I always remember years and years ago, when the Alchemy Voice suddenly became a temple of sound healing in London, and hundreds of people came through. That was one of the greatest joys that I would, at the end of the day, when people were really intoxicated by communion and the level of sharing, which was all about pure love and pure joy and pure revelation, that we stand, and I would put your recording with your beautiful voice and the choir thereof and the beautiful orchestration. I put it on full volume. The whole of South Kensington, in London, the 6th district of London. And I remember on a number of occasions I would hear, wait a minute, what am I hearing? Because I would hear the dear ones singing in the room. But then I realized that people outside in the street were listening and looking up and singing with us.
Oh my
in this extraordinary singing field of interior worship, as it were. I mean, the way that people were revealing the quantity of their souls was just exquisite, but also the joy of what was happening in the street. So everybody get singing.
Yes, yes, it's happening, isn't it? This is the glory of the internet, of course, which is the great mother in disguise when she's working at her best, is, this way of connecting us with all these, fiber optics right across the world. It was interesting because I was hearing somebody, I think it was on the Gaia, stream, or whether it was up, what's the other one? I can't remember, Udemy or something. But anyway, these two people were talking about 5G and the terror, and this film maker was talking about it. I thought, this is going to be interesting. And because obviously we're living within the field of conspiracy on the one hand and status quo on the other, and ne'er the twain will meet, and now we have another duality of people not trusting each other, and the whole kind of fear game continues. But he was really cool. I mean, I heard him and I thought, this is really cool. He said, as artists, obviously 5G is a whole different, ball game. Let's not pretend, because it's coming from satellites down, right? So it's not like you can switch off your telephone and go roaring into the woods and be free of it all, because it'll still be there. So what he was saying was, he said, as artists, he said, I feel there's a chance, because what it also offers us is this extraordinary capacity to communicate at a rate and a speed with each other that we need to be able to do in order to not to choose yet another sixth mass extinction. As artists, it is our role and our responsibility to actually lift our vibration so high, as you do with your amazing angels, to lift the vibration so high that that 5G itself will be singing like there's no tomorrow. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So that in other words, we're embracing what is already happening as artists. Let's make use of this. Let's engage with it. Let's really get that it has a really there's a really dark side to it. There's no point pretending, as there is to politics and the whole game. But the point is, we know everything we've been speaking about here is so profoundly other than that
Mm, mm.
game.
I mean, this is an extraordinary point that you're making, and it it makes me want to weep, because what you're saying in your wisdom is that if we can only see that whatever the horror is, whether it be 5G or COVID or the evisceration of our governmental systems,
Mm,
the terrifying, horrific details of black men and women being ripped apart on streets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of this, that if we can, in our horror, if we can detach, feel stillness and observe, in other words, go into the stillness where we echo the harmonies within us, that we can use harmony to literally startle the frequency, even if it is as high as 5G,
right.
into such startling that our unified sound will unify with it, and all of the ill that it would create will be turned from disharmonic dissonance into absolute harmony. And then who knows what will happen?
Right.
Maybe the intention of great darkness behind it, not the machine has that, but human beings might, will suddenly be completely,
Right.
their memory banks will be erased, neural pathways, neuroplasticity will open up, so
Right.
that something very different surges through their
Right.
bodies.
Right.
Whatever horror they've experienced, which has moved them into the perpetration of the act, which is we're seeing, it may be rhetoric, but it's still dark. It's completely
Absolutely.
changed. I mean, hopefully, I know one or two people. Katie is saying, talk about harmony, embracing it to such an extent that the vibration of grace lifts. Well, yeah, we are, darling. Beautiful sweet
Absolutely.
harmonies within us and
Yeah.
divine mirroring of love. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely, darling. That's it. This is a
Yes.
wonderful client of mine in California.
Absolutely, absolutely. But we can't be, we've got to be so utterly grounded in this. And of course, what this means is it's not like kind of let's all be sweetness and light and be harmonious. We can't just do that intellectually or mentally anymore, or even as a kind of fleeting performance. It's got to be a way of life.
Right,
It's got to be a way of life,
right, right.
hasn't it? You know, and that means really understanding what fundamental consciousness is, that we are born out of fundamental consciousness,
Right.
you know, and it's understanding that that unchanging note that you were talking about earlier that you experienced in the globe, which just completely disarmed everybody in the
Mm.
space, because it's that, you know, it's that capacity that you see, that you hear from the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he laughs. It's like fire coming out of his mouth when he says, you know, I am the Chinese most wanted enemy. You know, and he's just like roaring with laughter. And my God, that's some force field in there, you
Yeah,
know. And
yeah.
that's years of really rigorous practice, you know, out of a deep embodiment of what brings us back to where we started, which is the unconditional presence of love itself.
Yes, 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 yes. So this is, I mean, this is extraordinary, and I can see from the comments that people are really getting it. Wow, that is the most amazing point, Katarina from Sweden. Um, so we're onto something really extraordinary, and it feels to me that what we're both doing, and you and your extraordinary wisdom, we're weaving this context, this kingdom or domain of what potentialities can be, most of which is a remembering of something that we already knew. It's just that the information is not in the forefront of our consciousness, it's stored deep within ourselves. But as we have the experience of sounding it, whether it's because of the alert presence that we both bring to our speaking, and you to the extraordinary nature of your musicking, your singing, that by this we actually bring about a beginning of understanding what the new level of living can be, to
Yes,
allow us to move into unity consciousness. So
yes,
anyway, what I'm really saying is that giving this because I'm thinking about our listeners and our viewers,
Yes.
giving this context, I wonder if there are maybe three, maybe four, maybe five essential steps that are interesting possibilities, not that this fixes anything, of
Mm,
just potentials that we
mm,
can all engage in
mm,
to awaken this awareness. And thereby, the thing that you and I were always talking about of how the soma of the body, how
mm,
the embodiment of these notions
mm,
are fully experienced.
mm.
What do
Yes.
we need to do every morning with our voices, Chloe?
Well, I mean, is there anybody in the audience that wants to come in on this? Because I'm sure there's a lot of, I mean, for me, my most central body centered singing awareness map is what I call the seven sounds of love, which is a journey through, through the what I call the octave of consciousness, from the root of the body to the crown and back again. And each location of consciousness, which is essentially the musical chakras, is kind of reveals to us a dimension of love, uh, which ultimately links the instinctual with the intuitive, with the insightful realms of love. And some of us are really, really hot and connected with the instinctual. Others of us, empaths, many of us, are very connected with the heart center, but we need to develop the instinctual. Others of us are very high mind, insightful, love, beautiful, compassionate, but we need to really bring that down into the body. So it's like whatever practices are most available and organic for you to practice, that links silent spoken stillness, the stillness of the fundamental root note, with the with the cosmic food that takes us up into the heavenly realms and then brings that back
The
again.
two things come to mind. Firstly, and I can see that so many people are saying, but where can I get to Chloe? So, thinking in a very practical way. Uh,
Yeah, well, just go
are
to the website.
when we know that we're in social isolation at the moment, but
All
as
right.
as we creep out of this, well, not creep. But I have a line from T.S. Eliot in my mind. But as we come out of the social isolation, and when you and I are permitted, when you and your extraordinary workshops are permitted to meet others again in workshop, do you
Mm.
have anything planned this summer so that if people in Europe or indeed in the States wanted to fly over to do
Right.
a so they would find this on your website, wouldn't they?
It's all on the website, the chloegoodchild.com or the nakedvoice.com. Right now, actually,
So
I
get that, everybody. Chloe Goodchild. So Chloe Goodchild, GOODCHILD.com or thenakedvoice.com.
yes.
Don't do it now, do it later. Stay with us now. What
But
about any of your recordings, darling? Are there any recordings that would be very specific for this?
well, I tell you what, right now people can go to, it's a free meditation room. So if you take the chloegoodchild.com website and then just go slash meditation hyphen room, that'll take you directly to just some 10-15 minute meditations that you can just really nourish yourself with
Wonderful.
to start off with.
So that's very easily found also through the toolbar at the top of the website, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. It's all there. And then I mean, if people want to get hold of there are two things that I've got here that I can just uh, quickly share with you. Which is one is my book, which is The Naked Voice, and then the other one is a Sounds True audiobook, which is called
Awakening.
Awakening Through Sound. And you can get that online. You can just download that again from our website. If you're in America, you probably, I don't know whether they would be in a position to send you hard copy.
Just
And
go
at
to
the moment, yeah, at the moment, I'm actually working with the Shift Network. I'm doing a course which has just begun, which is called Express the Music of Your Soul. And we've got over 600 people already on that. I mean, you can still sign up for it if you just go to
shift.com, is it, or the shiftnetwork.com?
the shiftnetwork.com. That's right.
So
And
www.shiftnetwork.com. That's not shit, but shift.
yes, the shift,
The shift.
the
The
shift
shift
network.
network.
Yeah, yeah, .com.
So all of these wonderful people. Oh, you're so Joe. How lovely to hear you. Are there any? Okay, we're talking about best meditations. Yeah, to find our true note. Well, to find our true note. Gosh. Well, I suppose that is that spanning into me. Just go to the Alchemy of Voice. No, there isn't the Alchemy. What am I saying? Go to angelsofatlantis.com. You'll see on the shop page there are a series of recordings. To find your note, awakening is the sonic meditation that you need. And I'm just thinking about the practicability of what we're talking about to prepare people to come onto you so that they can actually feel all of the harmonics working through. Of opening my second recording of initiation, which is the chant of opening up the 8 chakras.
Oh my goodness, great.
Personal chakras, 7 chakras, and then moving into the 8th,
Great.
and
So,
therefore tapping into the I am presence. And
yes,
get chanting, guys, get singing.
it is, isn't it? And but also at the very simplest level, it's just about really taming the ego on an everyday level. So it's just like even like having a conversation like we're having now, or any, like tomorrow at breakfast or whenever, wherever you are in the street, to just start developing this unconditional, non-judging mind. You
Yes,
know, that is absolutely the basic step one, because without that, we're just going to be in duality forever. And the next the next major book of Revelations war will happen. And it doesn't need to happen. It
indeed.
doesn't need to this time.
Well, I feel that we're seeing this, that so many remarkable people are
Yes,
awakening through the
yes,
transparency of social media. So many statements are being made that
mm,
are liberating and revelatory statements that I
yes,
feel that, and coming, from people often that are in positions of power,
mm,
whatever field of power that may be, whether it be educational or governmental or religious. There's a lot of cacophony as well, as we know, but at the
yes,
same time, there are some very remarkable statements that are being made. And I don't feel it's just wistful hope within me. It will be okay. I
mm,
feel that there's something much deeper in
mm,
my observation, that there's a resonance that is being produced, which is very,
mm,
very unique.
yes,
And it's moving so fast. And dare I say,
absolutely.
although this is slightly out there, we're all, I'm sure many of the people who are listening in are very sympathetic to what I'm about to say. But I feel that we're being observed in a very benign way by extraordinary, universal, galactic, and cosmic intelligence
Mm,
who are very aware of what's taking place on planet Earth. And therefore, because their frequencies so often operate through sound and light, or light and sound,
mm,
because they're non-mattered, they're not in matter, they
mm,
don't matter. It's interesting, that word, isn't it? Which, of course, is all derived from ma, again, all matter derived from ma or matrix. That they're also, through their technology or through their thought process, which is highly electrified, they're using sonar, they're using harmonics to
mm.
shine down onto planet Earth.
Right, right.
And I
Wow.
believe that through sound, just as our ancient peoples were able to create vast change,
Mhm,
the chant that Moses and his people gave out at the Red Sea
mhm,
was Vayikra, which is an extraordinary Hebraic code The chant that Joshua used with his peoples as they walked around the city of Jericho 7 times, they blew their trumpets and gave a great shout, was Vayikra, and the walls of Jericho came tumbling down. So all the, these about creative and disharmonic tendencies, the creation of the Great Pyramids, similar codes were used from the ancient languages of syllabic invention, but it was the harmonic that was important. So that, you and I know that over the years, as we've moved through our own journey, we've released so many major programs within ourselves, purely and simply through A, the identification of what it is, and B, by transmuting through sound.
Exactly, exactly. It's so rich. What you're saying is so important. And there's a poem. I don't know how much longer people can handle this, but
We're going to have to finish soon, darling, I'm afraid.
well,
While I listen, I'm just looking at a few comments.
yes. Let's hear. That would be so precious to hear.
There are very few questions being asked, but there are there's a question. Lots and lots and lots of beautiful, it's so wonderful to hear you speak. Everything is so true. Pushita just said, yes, Stewart. Or, no, 3 exclamation marks. Lisa, what are you saying, darling? I'm not sure how, but I ended up listening to you both in a watch party. Anyway, so I think our comments have fed through to you.
Oh, right. So, in other words, more interaction needed?
I don't know what a watch party is. Is somebody watching in on us? They could be. Much of the conversation allowing us to be part of it. Oh, bless you, darling. Bless you. We send much love. Some of these high vibrational beings are wanting to reincarnate and help mankind to shift. This is from darling Lorraine, who is very, very, very into angels in a big way.
Yes. Yes.
Everybody's saying so beautiful. So Laurel, is it? Sorry, darling. Laurel Marie is saying so amazingly beautiful. Thank you, thank you. So lots of beautiful things. We have to meet again for part.
Let's carry on. Because it's very precious. Thank you so much, everyone, for the quality of your listening, so that we're in a position to be able to have this conversation. I'm very honored, very privileged.
So is there anything that I mean, that's beautiful. Thank you, darling. It's a beautiful tribute to these wonderful people who are listening in. We will have to finish, but is there anything that we need to be with sound as a finale?
Well, we could, let's see, what could we do? Probably, just to sound the Om might be very lovely. So if you actually just open your arms out and then just let the come down the center of your body. So it's like you're opening those angelic wings, and then on the ah, and then on the coming down the center of the body. And that's just a very lovely, simple, unifying thing to do. Everything is in there.
Beautiful. And so we say to darling Chloe and to all you wonderful people listening in, namaste, namaste, namaste. And look after yourselves and dispel fear through sounding it out of your body.
Absolutely. May it be so.
And do send us emails. Chloe has given her wonderful websites, www.chloegoodchild.com or www.thenakedvoice.com. A lot of you know mine, so if you need them, it's www.theangelsofatlantis.com or www.dianathevoiceofchange.com. If you go to www.stewartpearce.com, you'll be very bemused because it's a corporate site, so don't go there. And of course, you know, both on Chloe's sites, my, you know, etc., etc. There are lots of wonderful experiences to do with sound, and of course, don't forget that Chloe has a regular, often bi-monthly, or if there are more important things to be said, newsletter. So don't forget to go onto her site and sign up for that. And if you are not on my newsletter list, then please go to theangelsofatlantis.com, and you'll see very simply there's a login saying Stewart's News, etc. And thank you for listening in. And so we say finally, farewell and brave hearts.